Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome wherever you are, and welcome to a special recording this time of my experience of the War of the Worlds Immersive Experience, which I went to in London yesterday. I was going to do the recording when I got home last night, but I actually felt very tired, so I decided to do the recording today, which is the next day. It's a very warm day here in the UK, hence I've got one of my fans on at the moment, so hopefully you'll be able to hear me okay. Here's a spoiler alert. When I get to the actual show, I will be talking about what you experience, what you do, and my opinions about it. So if you haven't been yet, then it's probably worth, after I actually get to the point where I start talking about a show, to actually leave the stream and then enjoy it yourselves. Unless you really want to know what I was doing, then please stay tuned. Or come back until at the end and I'll give you if I thought it was worth it. But let's just do a brief story about War of the Worlds first. War of the Worlds is probably my second most favourite sci-fi genre after Star Wars. Star Wars is way ahead, that will always be my favourite, but War of the Worlds is a good second. Let's go a brief history about War of the Worlds background, so let's just hopefully this will work. It's now going to go over to there we go. I'm learning. Right, the War of the Worlds obviously was written by English author H.G. Wells way back in 1898. It was actually based on the short story, and it's about a Martian invasion of Earth, especially Surrey, which is very county near London. Surrey is also the area my mum's from, so I actually know a lot of these places that's actually in this story. Like I think he mentions Woking and Leatherhead and things like that. The book was very successful. It was a short novel. If you haven't read it yet, it's worth reading it. And then after the novel came, I think the next famous thing came the actual 1938 War of the Worlds radio drama done by Orson Welles in America. And the thing that made this even more famous was that many people actually thought it was real. So they were panicking, and countless things actually happened. Again, read this on Wikipedia. That gives you a more history of what actually happened that time. So it was actually broadcast on Halloween as well, Halloween 1938. They did another radio drama play, as you can see if you can read it, just 30 years later. And then after 1938, there was a bit of course, Second World War happened. And in 1953 came the very famous 1953 film, the first real screen version. And I love this film. Yes, it does look dated. Special effects for the 1950s were really good. And it was set in America, so slightly different storyline. And it was set from Victorian era England to 1953 Southern California. But they did mention the UK quite a bit in that, which was very nice to see. And yeah, I loved it. It was a very good film. And they stuck mostly to the book as well. It just made it more Americanized. And then after 1953, there was a bit of a lull, and you went into the 1968 radio drama, which was the 30th anniversary. And then in the 80s, we're going to the 70s, sorry, of course, I can't miss Jeff Wayne's musical version of War of the Worlds. That was released way back in 1978, and it's one of my favourite albums of all time. It starts off with Jeff Burton. Who's Jeff Burton? I do not know who Jeff Burton is. Richard Burton, even, the famous Welsh actor, who was the narrator for the whole album, and it was amazing. It's an amazing album, and Eve of the War is one of my favourite tracks, which is dun 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 da 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 da. Obviously, I can't play it on YouTube because then it gets muted. Hence why I've just sung my own version. If that gets muted, I'll be very surprised. And it was an amazing album, and if you haven't listened to it yet, then please do. I actually got it on cassette album, one of my very first ones I actually got. I think I got it in the early 80s actually. I missed a couple of years. So yeah, it was released in 1978, very good. And of course this immersive experience is based on the musical version of War of the Worlds. It was remade again in 2012, the new generation. The whole cast were completely redone. Hit and miss. It was a bit more disco-y. The music of the immersive experience is actually based on this version, the new generation, which was okay, I guess. Yeah, there's some hit and misses, like for instance Justin Hayward, who did the original Forever Autumn, which actually became a hit on its own, Gary Barlow did it, and Gary Barlow was okay. Yeah. Maverick Sable was Nathaniel the Parson. I didn't like that too much, but generally it was a good version, but it's not my favourite. I always go back to the original version. So after the original version 1978, there was in the 80s, if I can just find it for you, you can see it down here. In the 80s there was various video games were made for World of the Worlds, and a lot of them were not very good. This one was done in 1982. I can't see any pictures. Then in 1984, computer game by CRL. Again, if you go on YouTube, you'll probably find the clips of all these games. But generally, they all weren't that brilliant until 98, 99, when they were more released. Like this one was released in 1998. I've actually played no World of the Worlds computer games, surprisingly. Also during the 80s there was a TV series which was done in 1988, and it's a sequel. Is it meant to be based? Yeah, it was meant to be the sequel to the 1953 film. I saw 1 or 2 episodes. It was quite good, like in places, but then you could see they were running out of money, so I didn't really follow it. And after that we now go back up to more recently, and the War of the Worlds 2005 film, which was done with Tom Cruise, obviously. Now, this was loosely based on the book, because again, this was set in America, but there's a lot of things different with it compared to the book. I won't go through all that because that could be another stream, recorded stream. I thought it was alright, yeah, but they didn't mention Martians. The tripods weren't even mentioned. There were some bits that were linked to the book, and some bits that definitely weren't linked to the book. Tom Cruise did alright. It was a success. It was reasonable. Spielberg, obviously. UK was very, very, very briefly mentioned, which was a bit upsetting because it was set in Britain originally. But a nice little thing in this, the original male and female lead in the 1953 film actually appear right at the end of this film, which is very nice to see. And yeah, it wasn't awful, but it's not one of my favourite versions. I actually prefer the 1953 version. Also in 2005 there was 2 alternative films made, which I've not seen, so I don't know much about it. There was this Pendragon Pictures film. Pendragon are famous for having different versions of films, but the special effects don't look really good. This was actually based on the 1898 Victorian England, so fair play to them. They've actually based it on the actual original story. And then there was this other one, the Asylum film. Again, I hadn't read much about it. Oh, it's got C. Thomas Howell. Okay, yes, I have. It's the Sci-Fi Channel versions of their films, and they generally are pretty poor. They actually made War of the Worlds 2. Less said that, the better, to be honest with you. So after 2005, Jeff Wayne actually went on tour with his War of the Worlds musical show, and yeah, I went to 1 or 2, and they were really good. See if I can actually find it on here for you. Musical drama. No, you can't. Okay, no worries. I'm not going to rave too much about it, but it was actually a stage show. Yeah, and if you've been to the stage show, you see the whole orchestra, and it's really, really good. Right, we'll come to a point where I will start talking about the immersive experience. So if you want to experience it yourself, then it's best if you actually say goodbye. If you want to stick with me, then please do. So the immersive experience was based in London. It's near Aldgate Tube Station. Tickets are around £60, and you have to book a slot. The whole experience lasts for 2 hours with a 20-minute interval halfway through. So in theory there's a part 1, part 2, just like the album. When you get to the main site, the site is called Spirit Man, which is named after a track from the album. And from the outside, it just looks like an office building. But as soon as you walk in, you know you are in an amazing experience. And you can actually just walk in and treat it like a normal pub if you want to. When you walk in to the right, there's the ticket place where you give them your ticket that you already bought, or you could buy on the day, I suppose, but you have to book a later slot. And they give you a wristband, a paper wristband with a colour on it. Basically, you know when it's your turn to go into the experience is when this big Martian head, which I'll show you here, this is actually in a bar, there's the big Martian head. He actually steams even yellow smoke, because I was in the yellow group. So he did green, he did purple, but as I'm slightly colourblind, I got the colours slightly wrong. But lucky my mate Mark was around, he was letting me know if it was going to be my colour or not. But this is the bar area, so you can, if you see where my mouse pointer is, basically to the right here, that's where the ticket area and stuff was going to be. This is the bar. You could get a drink if you want to. Normal sort of London prices, they weren't cheap. And also surrounding the bar, other than this massive tripod, was various things like this, little pictures, and these pictures actually moved. This is from the album, the Jeff Wayne musical version, first album, the actual painted bits which you actually get in the album cover, which are amazing. So that was the first sighting of the Martians. That's the red weed. If you know the story, you know what I mean. That's H.G. Wells himself. And yeah, so you wait. You have to be there for at least 30 minutes before the show. And then when the yellow steam, in my case, came out, you then are told to go to the entrance. There's no pictures of the entrance side, and also there'll be no pictures of actually what's inside, because you're not allowed to take any. So again, this is now a big spoiler. If you don't want to ruin your experience of going there yourself and what to expect, then best say goodbye for now. So you first of all your group, I was in a group of 11 people, which was alright, but it came obvious right at the start that all the others were in a couple. So there was 5 couples and then me, which felt a bit out of place at times. But in the end, it turned out that I became the leader of the group, which kind of makes sense because I was the only one by myself, which didn't really affect the experience that much, but it was quite funny that I had to interact more with the actors inside, which was fun. So you are led first into you open the door and you go in, and then again, this is spoilers, so if you're still listening and you want to know how you experience yourself, then best say goodbye now. You're led inside, and you're led kind of by a kind of cyberpunk type actor dressed in sort of like cyberpunk steampunk type gear, because you actually start the experience 5 or so years after the landings. So he kind of gives you an introduction of what's going to happen. You're then led into sort of like a small type theatre, and you're greeted by sort of like a 5-10 minute hologram show introduced by Herbert Wells, H.G. Wells himself, and they tell you of their experiences. And then Carrie, if you know who Carrie is, of course, she's featured in the musical album, which is going to be Herbert's wife, future wife, but wife now, because this is set 5 years after, if that makes sense. They give you a brief description on what's going to happen, what happened, and then within that hologram show, Evil War kicks in, and wow, really good. You hear a kind of like an edited version. You won't hear the full song, because the full song goes on for about 9 minutes. You'll hear the new generation version. There's an extra beat to it, and I think you hear Justin Hayward's voice actually, which is surprising, but he sounds very sort of like fast, high, his voice much higher, and you get all that experience, which is really good. And then you are then led, one word of warning, you need flat shoes for this, honestly, because you'll be going up and down various levels, you'll be going under things and over things, and also it's quite dimly lit. So if you're afraid of the dark or extreme darkness, then this is not for you. It's very smoky, very good atmosphere. It kind of reminds me of the London Dungeon, what they're doing for now. It's a kind of like a 4D experience. You get the surrounds, you see a lot of things. You're kind of like, how can I describe it? It's like if you ever go to a secret cinema experience, it's kind of like you feel like you're in the actual set yourself. You're actually in the time period. So you'll see sights, you see sounds and smells as well. And of course, in this added bonus here on the immersive experience is that you get VR. We'll come more to that later. So anyway, you are led, you watch this type of theatre show, and then you kind of like time warped back into time of just before the attack happens, and you meet Ogilvy, who's the astronomer who discovers the Martians starting to land. You're then led into sort of like an observatory room where you go and then watch the landing, and then after that you're then led outside. You can't see me, but I'm using the preview comments here. Outside, and that's where the cylinder head drops off and the Martian, and then you get the second song of the War of the Worlds, which Horseman Artillery, something like that song, and Olgby goes out to try to investigate what's going on. And if you read the book, if you've seen the film, you know what happens to him. Yeah. And then you're meant to, if you're in a good group, you're all meant to interact really well with the actors. If you interact with them really well, then you do really well. And again, we were interacting a bit. I think a lot of those 10 people, those couples, they did know each other. I was really the stranger. I didn't know anyone, but I kind of made myself a bit more chatty as normal just to try to get into it and try and enjoy it, and it did work. But anyway, after what happened to Olgby, you're then led away by the trooper down to Herbert's house. You have to go down some stairways, this is why you need flat shoes. It's kind of like a windy sort of like staircase, and you have to walk down really slowly. I've got big feet, so I had to walk sort of like side-stepped. And then you're led outside Herbert's house, H.G. Wells' house, Herbert, and he's not in, so you actually go in via an open window. So that's where your first bit of exercise is. You duck down and go in, and I managed to get in. I was one of the tallest of the group, so being over 6 foot is a little bit of a struggle, but I managed to do it. And you're led into sort of like a sitting room, dining room, where you're in Herbert's main house, and you meet. I think she was called Bella, the maid. She was really good. She's really good interacting, saying, "Oh, there's not going to be no attack or anything like that," even though you can hear outside the attack is happening, and the Martians are getting closer. She then gets a phone call from Herbert, who you can hear no matter where you were asked to sit down on a massive dining table, enough for 12 people, and I was way towards the left, which didn't work too well for me, because I understood if you were going way to the right, you're getting more interactive experience. What was going to happen? And what was going to happen is you'll get a phone call. Bella was going to get a phone call, H.G. Wells, and you could hear him on the other side saying, get out now, they're coming. And she said, nah, we'll be fine here. And then you hear a couple earth tremors and earthquakes. The room doesn't shook, but you feel something, and it goes pitch black. So if you can't stand rooms that are pitch black, this is not for you, because you stay pitch black for a good 10 minutes. And again, I didn't feel the experience, but people on the right hand side of this big table felt sort of like the Martians going around the building, tickling their shoulders. It didn't affect me whatsoever, which was a bit of a shame. But then, after the sort of like 10 minutes of complete blackness, the Martians attack the room, and Belle, the maid, gets caught by the Martians. You hear her scream, and yeah, it's quite frightening. You are then led out of the building, out of the room, and a door opens. You head towards the light, head towards the door, and you'll be led by an artilleryman. Woman or man, it varies, I understand. And after that, you are let into, I'm just reading my notes because how I remember it from yesterday. Yeah, you get your VR headset put on, and you get help. And if you've never tried VR experience, the first 2 minutes can be a bit disorientated. I actually get motion sickness, so I was a bit wary about this, but I had to try it. You get help to put your VR sets on. If I were you, they do say if you wear spectacles, which I normally do, it's quite comfortable putting your VR headset of your spectacles on. No, there's not enough room, to be honest with you. It'd be quite painful. As my glasses are not the most reliable glasses I've got, I decided to wear my contacts for the whole day, and yes, it worked really well here. I put my contacts in, put the headset in, and yeah, for the first 2 minutes or so, it was a bit of a eerie experience. The VR technology is good, don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of bugs. A lot of when you walk around, you actually are still in Herbert's house, but you go from where you put your headset on over to where Herbert is. You have to walk all the way over there, and yeah, it was a bit of a eerie experience putting the VR set for the first time. I was leading the group, So I sort of like went straight into the middle of the room while everyone else was walking very, very carefully. When you look back at the other people wearing the headsets, all you see is their VR characters, and which is very clever but a bit eerie as well. They're all dressed up in sort of like Victorian gear, no facial movements. It's just like sort of like avatars just walking along the room. And there was a bit of bugginess. There was some of them floating, some of them at strange angles. I was told I was a guy wearing a big top hat, because obviously I can't see what I was wearing. You can't see your hands either. So if you put your hands in front of you, there's nothing there. It's just a VR set. And then you have to walk over to where Herbert character was, and as you go outside, you'll see the Martians start landing and just missing you. And then you're then led to another scene with the VR headset still on, where the artillerymen shoot down a tripod, but you get caught in it. And it was eerie. It again, I know VR technology is still trying to get good, but it will get much better. I understand through the very first weeks of this, it was very, very buggy. You have to get used to when you're wearing your VR headset that there's going to be sort of like interaction of the scenes. So you're going to, if you've ever seen a hologram room of Star Trek, it's like that. You'll see a grid formation, and then it flips into the next scene, which in this case was the artillerymen shooting the Martian. And after that, you are then led out of that area by another artilleryman who's badly injured. So it gets some of the people in the group to put first aid, just bandages on them. And I led them to safely, so I got a round of applause because I was the first one that arrived. And then we had to get out of his home into, my memory goes a bit on this bit area, because I think you do go to another VR scene outside his house as well. And two of the group where they were standing were actually inside the house, when in fact they were meant to be outside the house, so they didn't get very good experience there. But that was unfortunate. But after this, you are then, the artilleryman needs to be bandaged up by the first aid people, which is you guys, and then you duck under sort of like a little passageway, and that's where you go and find the boat. And here you then are put into two groups of 6, and you put your VR headset on, and basically the actor who's there, who's like the ferryman, tells you that we're heading out. And this is actually quite a nice little bit. This is the bit I was more worried about because of the motion sickness and everything, but it wasn't too bad in the end. Something else later caused me to be a bit but you start off in the boat, and it's a good like 10-15 minute sequence of, you first hear a kind of newish version of Forever Autumn, because Justin Hayward sounds like he was on helium or something, so it might be someone else singing it. And you're led through Forever Autumn scene. You go on sort of like on this VR boat going through the Thames. So you look to your left, there's the House of Parliament being burnt down by a Martian, and on the right, Martian attacking various things. And that leads into Thunderchild. And Thunderchild obviously is the boat that battles against the Martians and also saves George, because George is trying to find Carrie, his fiancée, who's soon to be his wife, and she gets rescued. She goes onto a boat, and the boat's just about to be destroyed by the Martians who are there attacking it, but are saved by Thunderchild, which is a British frigate, a boat. And of course we know that Thunderchild then gets destroyed itself. And then you are on the VR, and you're going up and down the oceans, a bit of a storm as well. I thought my motion sickness would kick in here, but actually it didn't. And then thankfully, and then the end of part 1 is that the Martians have now conquered Earth, even though again in War of the Worlds, the book and the musical, it's only centered on England, so I presume they're attacking the rest of the world as well. And the red weed, the Martian weed, takes over from Earth, and all you see in front of you is the red weed. And then that ends part 1, and you then led into the red. You take your VR headset off and led into the red weed bar.